level for economic and societal benefit. I absolutely and utterly agree with them. The private sector does not do that, and if the private sector refuses to, as it has, invest its profits in taking society forward and developing research and development, then why should they get to profit in a partnership with the state from that research and development? Why doesn't the state itself use the valuable research that we've commissioned and do the development itself? Why do we just develop these ideas and hand them over to private companies? Why wouldn't the state take a lead role in actually bringing some of those ideas to fruition? Now, the usual response we get is, oh, we don't have the money, it can't be done, where will we get the money from? Well, the European Investment Bank exists precisely to do that. There is no impediment at all to the state accessing these funds. That bank is ready to 50-50 match state funds for strategic projects. And I think we will and should explore what type of strategic projects could be developed, what talents and what potential does Ireland have that other countries don't have, that we could link into and play a lead role in turning around the situation economically. Because what we're talking about now in this bill is taxpayers' money being used to allow money to be spent outside the state, for SFI funding to be spent outside the state for the first time. You know, creating jobs in food factories in South America isn't going to provide employment for the almost 500,000 people in Ireland who are on the dole at the moment. So really, if the state has R&D opportunities to develop, why can't we benefit and link that in to creating the tens of thousands of jobs that can be backed up on the back of that investment? And I think the reason why I would have concerns about why we're not doing that and what's been done so far is precisely because of the experience that we've had with this organisation to date. What returns have the state got, and has the money that we put in from R&D? What R&D projects, knowledge base, you know, when the R&D project's knowledge base is patented, where's our guarantee that the state is going to recoup its investment? It patently hasn't actually been there. What has been the return on the investment to date? What level of commercial funding has there been to date? Clearly not enough. The private sector really has engaged in an effective strike of capital where investment in R&D is concerned. So when we're looking in this bill about SFI moving to applied research, we need to look and say, well, you know, will basic research be funded as before, and where will the benefits from that come from? Now, I'm not sure that these questions have been answered at all, or that the government has strategically looked at what's possible in this. Instead, we have a ridiculous situation where on a daily basis we get announcements of 20 jobs here, 30 jobs there, 100 jobs over the next 16 years. We had in my own area the Minister for Jobs appearing at the opening of a 24-hour McDonald's. Is this the type of economy and the type of jobs that we are creating, while good quality public sector jobs and decent necessary tasks which are there to be fulfilled are not invested on, and talents and people lie on the dole? So we need to be a bit more creative and a bit more strategic. In many ways, actually, the way the state was in its early years, when it undertook some very adventurous projects like the electrification schemes under the early years of the ESB, the development of Aer Lingus and transatlantic flights and so on, showed a bit of imagination and a bit of potential, and created companies which have given employment and quality work and services over decades, which is something that the private sector hasn't simultaneously developed. So I think we need to look a bit more cleverly, and I'd just like to take a few minutes to deal with the whole area of wind and wave energy and the potential for research and development in this area, because to me it is an area which could bring massive employment to the state and massive benefit, because it is a fact that the conditions in Ireland that exist are probably one of the best internationally for the development of wave and wind energy, almost unique actually in terms of wave power. And you see, we have to look at this big project against the backdrop of what's happened to date. And to date, it is a fact that the funds from, the gains from government-funded research and scholarships have really been siphoned off or handed over to the private companies rather than benefiting the public. And I think that's the thing that we have to unlock here. In the 1970s and the 1980s, wind energy research in Ireland was small. Absolutely, but it was actually in line with what was happening in other countries, particularly countries, we'll say, for example, like Denmark, which is roughly the size of ourselves. Now, the Irish government at that time failed to tap into the potential that existed and ignored the potential that was there in the early years. The Danish government, on the other hand, decided to target that area. And in the intervening decades, a country similar to ours, who started off at the same time, have ended up being a world leader in the production of wind towers and wind turbines and so on, which has been an enormous benefit to the citizens of that state in terms of providing employment and so on. Sadly, in an Irish context, the Irish government followed their neighbour, Mrs Thatcher, in the nuclear direction. The British government went in the nuclear direction, as did the United States, abandoned the area of alternative forces, and the Irish government just didn't take up the slack and missed the boat either. I don't think we can afford to make that mistake again, as we are on the early stages of the exploration of the potential of wave power. Now, nobody is naive about this. The development of energy from wave power is a hugely costly undertaking. No question or doubt about it. It is going to take enormous resources and take enormous investment. But why not? Why are we lowering our horizons in terms of what is possible? If people in the earlier years had taken that attitude to the electrification of Ireland and the early years of the ESB, the country wouldn't have developed in the way that it did. And what made the difference at that time was a state-directed programme that was incredibly ambitious, internationally, way ahead of actually where other countries were. They were talking of these people lost the plot or whatever, but they were bold and they were daring, and it yielded results. And there's no way on earth that wave power, or the potential from wave power, can be developed if it's left in private hands. It's a simple fact. We have to note the fact that WaveBob collapsed in the recent past, a couple of weeks ago. This was actually the most promising private company who was dealing with the area of harnessing wave energy, and it went to the wall. Went to the wall, we might add, after 9 million had been invested in it, but it's clear that they were too small to bring the objective to fruition. And having 4 or 5 small private companies competing and doing small projects, sinking billions at a time, is not going to bring the project to the level that it should be brought to. If we're to develop this, and I think we should, why wouldn't the state match the fact that there are 4,000 postdoctoral researchers on the dole, that there are students in the colleges who are studying science, young engineering students and so on? Why wouldn't the ESB open up a research programme for 500 of these engineers and scientists to be taken under the wing of the ESB, linking in even when they're in the college, and put them to work on developing this area? The benefits to the state are potentially absolutely enormous, and there is no point in continuing wasting millions on small private companies who are not going to be able to develop this. And I think we're being incredibly short-sighted actually in terms of the potential which could be achieved in this area. Clearly, the whole area of wind power is enormously controversial in many parts of the rural communities, and that is something that is a disgrace, in my opinion. The way communities and residents have been treated by these companies is unacceptable to my mind. But there's no reason why these companies should have alienated people living in those communities or interfered with their quality of life. The development of wind power offshore wind harnessing is absolutely viable, readily available, and there's no need to discommode people living in parts of this country and destroying the landscape with wind turbines when there's a successful and viable option available instead. But again, in this area, we see how state research has been siphoned off to benefit the private sector, and the Irish economy falls short in terms of the job creation potential that we could get out of that. With companies like Airtricity, Mainstream Renewable Power, Element and so on in the area of wind powers. These companies don't make anything, not a thing. They're not engaged in any manufacturing or production whatsoever. All they are is managers of the project. Now, if the state feels it needs to manage what are natural resources owned by the people, and you think they're absolutely brilliant and you've got to get them, well, let them manage the project. Don't hand over the ownership of all of our natural resources to these individuals in order to gain private profit for themselves. You don't have to do that and leave the country and the taxpayer with absolutely nothing. The essential point here really is that we need to absolutely invest in the whole area of research and development. It's critical. And, you know, in some ways, maybe out of the crisis, we have an opportunity now to tap into that talent that is lying idle. But we won't do that if we just, you know, tinker around at the edges. There has to be a vision, there has to be a boldness in terms of this, and there has to be a realisation that job creation will not come unless the state takes a lead in this area. And that's not just an ideological point or a propaganda, it's a fact. It's a fact based on the experience of all of the years of austerity that we've had. The fact that 1,600 people a week are leaving these shores, our best, most talented, creative young people being driven out because of the lack of employment opportunities, over 20% youth unemployment and so on. And, you know, that's criminal in terms of the waste of the potential of those people individually, but also because of what it robs the state and the overall economy if we could tap in to that potential and put these people and their talents to work. So,
the Deputy's 2 minutes remaining.
Thanks, Ciarán. I think, Minister, that development and research and development and SFI is fine, but this is steering investment in the direction of the private sector. It's repeating the mistakes that have been made already, which means valuable taxpayers' money is correctly being invested in research and development, but the benefits of that investment is going to line the pockets of the few rather than being used to benefit the many, particularly in an area of public works and job creation where we could pioneer many areas of investment.